After calming down, Lin Xun has been thinking about this issue in his heart, all of which are unknown to him. He doesn't know what kind of risks are hidden in the first pass of Kinyan Avenue, which is known as the Refining God, and what consequences will he suffer if he fails to pass the pass. But he knew very well that as long as he broke through, he would be able to obtain Xiaoming Divine Art Method, and he was one step closer to the blood-colored portal at the end of the Kinyan Avenue, that is, the gate to heaven. Whether to break in or not, at a time like this, no one told Lin Xun what to do. He could only choose by himself. And many more. Lin Xun suddenly remembered, if there is no one here, where did the voice just come from? I dare to ask the seniors, if the junior wants to pass this level, what preparations need to be made? Lin Xun suddenly raised his head and bowed his hands to the surroundings in a distant salute. Although he didn't know who the owner of the voice was, it was the best attitude to lower his stance and ask questions at this time. However, Lin Xun waited for a long time, but no one answered. Only the light curtain just a foot in front of him floated quietly and glowed brightly. It seems that you can only decide for yourself. Lin Xun sighed in his heart, but there was a flash of determination in his eyes. He was never a person who was hesitant to look ahead and look back. Since the opportunity is in front of him, he will never be reconciled if he doesn't make it. Break. Lin Xun spit out a word from his lips. This is like a signal. As soon as the sound is heard, the clear and cold voice sounded again. Start to pass the level, understand and master the A Guang Lingwina apostrophe, then the level is successful. Stream a spirit pattern. Is it actually a means to test your own seal carving spirit patterns? Just when Lin Xun was puzzled, ripples suddenly appeared in the light curtain in front of him, as if he had woken up from the silence. Immediately, Lin Xun saw that a dense, complex and obscure spiritual pattern was reflected in the light curtain, and each spiritual pattern was like a flying streamer, flowing gracefully, making people dazzled. Lin Xun's eyes were suddenly attracted. He couldn't help but stepped forward and stared intently. From a very young age, Lin Xun has followed Mr. Lu's side, and he has a very good understanding of the way of spirit patterns. The so-called spirit patterns are also called spirit patterns, and each spirit pattern can play a different role and power. According to the size of the power, the spirit patterns are divided into basic spirit patterns and advanced spirit patterns. The basic spirit pattern is a single spirit pattern, such as the red fire spirit pattern, the greenwood spirit pattern, the Gengjin spirit pattern, and so on. Advanced spirit patterns, also known as spirit pattern arrays, are composed of different basic spirit patterns. In a word, spirit pattern masters like to refer to basic spirit patterns and advanced spirit patterns as spirit pattern patterns and spirit pattern arrays. This kind of name is also related to the classification of the spiritual pattern apprentice and the spiritual pattern master. For example, in the world of practice, those who can master 36 basic patterns of spiritual patterns can be called elementary level apprentices. Those who master 72 basic patterns can be called middle level apprentices with 100 patterns. There are 0 and 8, which can be called high level apprentices. And those who can independently complete a spirit pattern array can be called a qualified spirit pattern master. Of course, Lin Xun is not clear about the division of these titles, but he is familiar with all kinds of basic spirit patterns. In the years when he followed Mr. Lu, Lin Xun's daily life was almost inseparable from studying and carving spirit patterns. Now, there are thousands of spirit patterns that he has mastered. However, these are all basic spirit patterns, and with calm Lin Xun's current cultivation, he can only engrave basic spirit patterns. But even so, if other spiritual pattern masters in the cultivation world knew that Lin Xun had mastered the seal carving of thousands of basic spiritual patterns at the age of 13, he would have lost his jaw. After all, being able to master the seal carving of 108 basic spirit patterns is enough to be called a senior spirit pattern apprentice. With such a comparison, one can immediately see Lin Xun's extraordinary accomplishments in the basic spirit pattern. It's just a pity that Mr. Lu didn't tell Lin Xun about this, and every time Ling Xun asked about it, he was always denied by Mr. Lu. However, no matter how Ling Xun thought about it, he had never heard of it. Among the basic spirit patterns in this world, there is actually a streamer spirit pattern. Yes, Ling Xun could see at a glance that what was displayed on the light curtain was a basic spirit pattern, definitely not a spirit pattern array. It's just that in his memory, he has never heard of the name La Guang Lingwen, and even Mr. Lu has never mentioned a word. Of course, Ling Xun is also clear that there are so many basic spirit patterns, which can be said to be innumerable. What he doesn't understand doesn't necessarily exist. He gathered his mind and saw that the first test of the Kinyan Avenue was only a basic spirit pattern, and Ling Xun's heart jumped. He is not good at anything else, but he is very confident in the spirit pattern, especially since it is only a basic spirit pattern to comprehend and control. There is no pressure on Ling Xun. Without any hesitation, Ling Xun began to concentrate on comprehension. When he really began to comprehend, Ling Xun realized that he was wrong, and it was ridiculous. At this time, in his field of vision, the streaming light pattern was like thousands of dancing lights, circling endlessly with different trajectories. Every track is so mysterious, but when thousands of tracks are intertwined and superimposed on each other and keep running, it is no longer mysterious, but dense, complicated, and obscure. Just looking at it at a glance, it is dazzling, and it is impossible to distinguish the clues at all. After watching it for a long time, it even makes people feel upset and almost want to vomit blood. Although his body is thin and weak, Ling Xun's consciousness has always been tough and strong, which is a must-have qualification for a spiritual pattern apprentice. If the soul is not strong, it is difficult to comprehend and master the pattern of the spirit pattern. Therefore, for cultivators, not everyone is qualified to become a spirit pattern master, which is one of the important reasons why the number of spirit pattern masters in this world is so scarce. However, at this time, facing this streaming light spirit pattern, even Ling Xun felt a little bloated after watching it for a long time, and felt extremely exhausted. This surprised Ling Xun, and he became more and more aware that he had underestimated this streamer spirit pattern just now. Although this spirit pattern is not fake, it is extremely unique, but the foundation that Ling Xun has mastered in the past is completely different. In the past basic spirit patterns, every texture and trajectory has traces to follow, except that the patterns are more complicated, and it is not difficult to understand. The most important thing is that no matter what the basic spirit pattern is, it is static. This is common sense, because each basic spirit pattern has a unique and fixed texture and trajectory. When engraving a spirit pattern, once the texture and trajectory are offset and wrong, it is equal to failure, and there is no trace of prestige at all. You can come. Just like handwriting on paper, each word represents a different meaning. If the stroke is wrong, it is a typo, and it is meaningless. But the streamer spirit pattern in front of him broke Ling Xun's inherent thinking. For the first time, he knew that the original static spirit pattern could actually move. But since the texture and trajectory of this La Guang Lingwen will operate and change, how should it be engraved? You must know that once the seal is carved, it is a fixed trajectory and texture. The more Ling Xun thought about it, the more shocked he felt, and the more he felt that this streamer spirit pattern was unusual. If he guessed correctly, in today's cultivation world, there is probably no basic spirit pattern that can compare with it. It is so unique that it breaks the fixed routine of engraving spirit patterns and creates an incredible new genre. Is this really a spirit pattern? Ling Xun pondered for a long time, but couldn't make a conclusion. He stopped thinking about it and concentrated on studying. Time passed without knowing it, and I don't know how long it took. Ling Xun's head became more and more swollen, heavier and heavier, and his thoughts were a little overwhelmed. The eyes and hearts are filled with the trajectories of the dancing spirit patterns, so dense, so obscure, and so messy. In a trance, Ling Xun seemed to see a stream of light streaking across the sky in the dark night, some dim, some bright, some as long as horses, and some as short as flying feathers. But no matter what kind of streamer, their speed is extremely fast, like a flash of fireworks, and they disappear in the blink of an eye. Vaguely, Lin Xun wanted to catch some spiritual light, and subconsciously, he raised his finger and gently outlined it on the light curtain. The fingertips are like seal brushes, and with a single stroke, a delicate and graceful trace is drawn on the light curtain. With Lin Xun's fingertips sketching frequently, a trail of trajectories emerged, all of them being light and lively, constantly pacing on the light curtain. Soon, an astonishing scene appeared. The other spiritual traces that were flying on the light curtain seemed to be pulled by something, and they all gathered towards the trace outlined by Lin Xun, like a school of fish finding their leader and running together. A faint smile appeared on the corner of Lin Xun's lips at some point, and it really did. He kept waving his fingertips, and there were more and more spiritual traces on the light curtain, until later, when he saw that the entire light curtain could not bear so many traces of spiritual traces, Lin Xunfu reached his heart, and the fingertips he was sketching suddenly snapped. Pause. A strange hum sounded, and on the entire light curtain, countless spiritual traces began to gather and merge. In the end, they all merged into the spiritual trace under Lin Xun's fingertips. Boom! Immediately, the entire light curtain turned into a rain of light, disappearing one after another. At this moment, Lin Xun retracted his fingertips, and in his heart, he had fully controlled all the secrets of the Luguang Lingwin. The secret is that the Luguang spirit pattern is not a basic spirit pattern at all, but an inheritance of exercises. It's just that people use the means of spirit patterns to completely integrate the mystery of the practice into the texture and trajectory of each spirit pattern. The name of this exercise Isui A tilde Xiaoming Divine R2 apostrophe. Lin Xun murmured, it seems that it should be called inheritance spirit pattern, but I don't know who it is, and it is possible to create a brand new spirit pattern just to inherit a practice method. But it's incredible,